When can I take my plants outside? That's a question I get so often at this time of year. And in this video, we're going to try and answer that for you. Now, if I had my way, I would take them out way sooner than I actually do. There's a few reasons for that. Number one is the sunshine. When the sun starts shining like this, I just get itchy feet. I want to get my plants out into the greenhouse because you cannot beat sunshine for your plants. It doesn't matter how good your grow lights are, and I have some pretty good ones. They're just never going to be able to compete with glorious sunshine. Number two is I am running out of space. My germination shed is getting very full right now. Now I have freed up some space. I have taken some of my tomatoes out of the greenhouse. They can handle a little bit lower temperatures than my chili plants. I've also taken out all my marigolds. Make sure you are growing marigolds because those will attract all those lovely hoverflies and ladybugs that will help get rid of your aphids. And we have freed up some space. But today I'm going to be potting up some of my plants, which means I am going to be making that space a little tight again. The UK is in the equivalent growing zone of about 8 or 9 if you're comparing to the USDA growing zones. It's got some variation obviously through the country. If you're in southern England, around about March to mid-April, that's your last frost date. If you're in the north, like Scotland, it could go up to May, end of May even. Where I am, I'm in the Midlands. Our last frost date is mid-April to late April. And that creates some challenges, but it's about the limit of what I was willing to accept, which is why we moved here. I wouldn't go any further north because that really creates some extra challenges that I didn't feel like having. Now, you have to take those into account. If you're in a greenhouse, that means you can extend your season somewhat by a few weeks. So greenhouse isn't some magical thing. It still gets very cold in here at night unless you do have a heater. I have a frost heater, so it basically stops it from going below 4 degrees Celsius. Because we'll talk about temperature in just a little while, what chilies can handle, how they thrive. But as long as you can bring them out into a greenhouse a little bit before your last frost date, you're taking a bit of a risk, but you should be okay. Because what's going to happen is the soil is going to heat up and it's going to create some thermal mass, which means that at night, if it does dip down to around 3-4 degrees Celsius, then you should still be okay. Now let's talk about temperatures, because frost will kill your plants. If the root system of your plant gets below freezing, that's it, game over. But let's go through the range. Let's see what your plant can actually handle. 6 degrees Celsius, your plant is going to survive. It's not going to be very happy. You'll start seeing leaf drop, flower drop. There'll be other damage that's going to be apparent on that plant. 10 degrees Celsius, this is where dormancy kicks in. This is when your plant is going to likely go dormant. And the problem with this is the longer it sits at that 10 degrees Celsius, the longer it's going to take for it to come out of that dormancy once temperatures do recover. Now, this doesn't mean if it drops below 10 degrees for a couple of hours overnight that you're going to have problems. That's not an issue. And most of the time, the soil will have enough latent heat that it will keep those temperatures a bit higher anyway. The problem is when you have a 24-hour time period where there's an average of 10 degrees or less, that's when you're going to start seeing some issues. 13 degrees Celsius, your plant will be slowing down at that stage. It'll be alive, it's just not going to be thriving at all. Now, the magic number for me is 16 degrees Celsius. At this point, the more common species like Capsicum annuum is going to start growing again. Some other species, maybe you'll have a few challenges, but generally at this point, your plants won't be sulking anymore and you'll see some actual growth happening. The real sweet spot is around 20 to 27 degrees Celsius. For us here in the UK, that's around about June, mid-June, when we start seeing those sort of temperatures. And that's when the plants really start to thrive. You'll see massive growth and also a lot of flowering and fruiting happening at that point. And that extends, hopefully, if the weather plays ball, it'll extend through from June, July, August, and maybe even to September quite a bit. So that's optimal. Now, you can actually go too hot as well. If you're going to be averaging temperatures 32 and above, then yeah, things are going to get a little bit challenging for your plants, and especially if they get up to the 40s. We've had 40 degrees Celsius here in the UK before, but it doesn't last very long. It lasted a couple of days, and plants can handle that. It's when it's consistently. If it's sat at 40 degrees Celsius for weeks at a time, your plants aren't going to be incredibly happy. Now, I've mentioned greenhouses a few times already, and I am fortunate enough to have a couple greenhouses as well as a polytunnel, and it makes all the difference, especially if you are in a colder climate. It gives you an extra few weeks on each end of the season. So the strategy, if you do have a greenhouse, is to take your plants outside about 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost date. I would still recommend getting a small heater set on the frost setting. You don't need it to be some tropical climate inside the greenhouse, which would cost an absolute fortune. But at least on the frost setting, what that does is if the temperatures do dip down a bit low, then the frost setting will kick in and it will keep that frost away. If you don't have a greenhouse, there are alternatives. You could use a cold frame. You could use a 2-liter Coke bottle, cut off the bottom and put that over your plant. Or even as I've done in some of my earlier videos, you'll see that I had a plastic greenhouse. I think it cost me like 20 bucks, and that did a perfectly fine job as well. The only difference is if you are going to do that outside and you're going to plant directly in the soil, the ground is still very cold and it's going to take months for that soil to actually heat up. So I would recommend, if you can, create a raised bed, get that soil raised up a bit. That's going to warm it up quite a bit. It's one of the reasons I grow in pots is because I can control those temperatures a lot better. Even inside that cheap plastic greenhouse that I had, I used pots, and that's what helped me to maintain those temperatures and grow some amazing chili plants. Let's talk about hardening off. I've done videos on this in the past. Go have a look. I think there's one titled Hardening Off the Lazy Way. I still do it exactly that same way. It's another reason why I like to bring my plants out a little bit earlier than some people might. And that's because the sun is still quite low in the sky. It's quite a bit past midday. But even when it is midday, the sun is not directly overhead like it is going to be later in summer. It's coming in at an angle like that. So it's really not as strong as it's going to be in a couple months' time. And that helps, because if you are going to put them outside, if you live somewhere like Florida or somewhere where you get some really strong sunshine, even at this time of year, you're probably going to fry your plants if you take them straight outdoors without hardening them off. But here in the UK, if I take them out earlier in the season, so like by the latest mid-April, then it means that I can just take them straight out here. I don't have to shade anything off, and those plants are going to be perfectly fine. So that to me is the lazy way of doing this. If you don't have that ability, or you don't have a greenhouse and you can't take it out a little bit earlier and you are putting them out later, you're going to have to harden them off. That just means putting them outside in the sunshine for maybe half the day and then putting them in some shade for another half of the day. Or you can use some netting and shade them off that way. If you live somewhere like Spain, then you're probably going to need netting all year round because they have a good amount of sunshine. Very jealous. So hardening off is important. But if you do it right, it actually doesn't have to be as much of a chore as it can seem. I hope this video has helped you out, given you some assurance about what to do at this time of year. And if you do have any questions that I haven't answered in this, let me know in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer. And I hope that your season goes fantastically. If the weather is going to continue as it is today, then I think we're in for a real good one. Until the next video, thank you so much for watching, and stay spicy.